Rational decision making.
What is rational decision making? Rational decision making is a central assumption in economics. It means that individuals and firms are assumed to make decisions in a logical and consistent way, weighing up the costs and benefits of each choice. The aim of this assumption is to provide a clear framework for analyzing economic behavior. In this model, it assumes consumers aim to maximize their utility or satisfaction from consumption, and firms aim to maximize their profits, which are the difference between the total revenue and total cost. This framework underpins the construction of demand and supply curves, market equilibrium analysis, and much of economic theory studied in A-level economics. The first assumption is that consumers aim to maximize utility by making rational choice. Utility refers to the satisfaction or benefit a consumer gains from consuming goods and services. Consumers are assumed to act rationally, meaning they carefully weigh up the costs and benefits of different options and choose the combination that gives them the highest possible satisfaction from their limited income. According to the law of diminishing marginal utility, each additional unit of a good consumed provides less extra satisfaction than the previous one. This explains why demand curves slope downwards. Consumers are only willing to buy more of a good if its price falls, because the extra satisfaction they gain from further consumption decreases. The utility maximization rule states that consumers will spend their income in a way that gives them the most satisfaction. They do this by spreading their spending so that the marginal utility per pound is the same for all goods. If one good gives more satisfaction per pound than another, the consumer will switch some of their spending towards that good until the balance is restored. This model assumes that consumers have perfect information about prices, quality, and alternatives, so they're able to make the best possible choice. It also assumes that consumers act in their own self-interest, aiming only to maximize their personal welfare. These assumptions form the basis of neoclassical demand theory, which explains how and why consumers make choices in markets. The second assumption is that firms aim to maximize profits. Profit is the difference between a firm's total revenue and its total costs. Firms are assumed to act rationally, meaning they make decisions that aim to achieve the highest possible level of profit. Profit maximization is seen as important because it provides the funds needed for investment and innovation, allows firms to reward shareholders through dividends, and helps ensure that firms' long-term growth and survival in the market. The profit maximization rule states that firms maximize profit at the level of output where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. If the revenue gained from producing one more unit is greater than the cost of producing it, the firm can increase profit by expanding output. However, if the cost of producing an extra unit is higher than the revenue it brings in, producing more will reduce profit. A rational firm will therefore continue to produce until marginal costs and marginal revenue are equal. This model assumes that firms have perfect knowledge of their costs, prices, and market conditions, and that they act in the self-interest of owners and shareholders, focusing only on profit. These assumptions form the basis of the neoclassical theory of supply, which explains how firms are expected to behave in competitive markets.
Reasons why consumers may not aim to maximize utility. 1. Influence of other people's behavior, herding. 2. Habitual behavior. 3. Inertia. 4. Poor computational skills. 5. The need to feel valued. 6. Framing and bias. Influence of other people's behavior. The bandwagon effect. Sometimes consumers make decisions based on what others are doing rather than their own preferences. This herding behavior can lead to market bubbles, fashion trends, and social media crazes that don't necessarily maximize individual utility. An example of this was the craze over Labubus. Social proof in action. When we see long queues at restaurants or sold out products, we assume they must be good, even if we haven't researched them ourselves. This social proof can override our rational decision-making process. Habitual behavior. Once we establish routines, we often stick to them without reassessing whether they're still optimal. For example, most people will go to the same coffee shop every morning, even when there's better or cheaper options nearby. This habitual behavior means consumers don't constantly reevaluate every decision to maximize utility. Instead, they rely on established patterns that may no longer serve their best interests. Inertia. Inertia keeps us doing what we've always done, even when change would benefit us. Switching banks, mobile phone providers, or even changing study habits requires effort that many people simply can't be bothered to make. This creates fascinating market dynamics, as even though some products that may no longer be popular are still bought due to inertia. Poor computational skills. Information overload. Modern consumers face an overwhelming amount of choice. Comparing every possible option for every purchase would be mentally exhausting and time consuming. Instead, we use shortcuts and rules of thumb that may not lead to perfect utility maximization. Mathematical limitations. Not everyone has strong computational skills. Calculating the best mobile phone contract, comparing complex financial products, or working out the true cost of hire purchase agreements requires mathematical ability that not all consumers possess. Time constraints. Perfect rationality would require endless research and calculation. In reality, we make decisions under time pressure, using good enough choices rather than optimal ones. Imagine it's the back to school rush and you're in need of school shoes. You're more likely to pick a good enough choice than the best one due to not having enough time to calculate and evaluate each and every choice. The need to feel valued. Economic theory often ignores emotional and psychological factors, but these play a huge role in real world decision making. Luxury products. Luxury products are a good example of this. Are people buying them for their functional ability or for the status and recognition they provide? Individuals may feel forced to buy certain things due to peer pressure and the need to fit in, ignoring rationality. Framing and bias. The framing effect. The way information is presented dramatically affects our decisions. A granola bar labeled 95% natural flavors and ingredients is more appealing than a granola bar labeled with only 5% artificial flavors. This effect is commonly used to make goods seem more appealing, even though they may not be rational, such as half full versus half empty. Cognitive biases. Our brains use mental shortcuts that can lead to systematic errors in judgment. Confirmation bias makes us seek information that supports our existing beliefs. However, anchoring bias means the first piece of information we receive heavily influences subsequent decisions. These biases mean we don't process information objectively, challenging the assumption of rational decision making.